Hello, I would like to talk to you about the European Union and global hegemonic order. My name is Zielonka. I'm professor of politics at the University of Venice and Oxford, two old medieval universities. And I'm delighted to join you today in this video encounter. You may think that the term hegemony doesn't apply to the European Union. Why? Because European integration was designed to get rid of power politics. This was the idea to put not only history of war behind, but also all the costs of hegemony in Europe, which always was present through ages. So European integration was about to put those ghosts to sleep. Large and rich states were no longer to bully small and poor ones. And in particular, Europe was not to be ruled by Germany again. And the institutional embodiment of the integration project, the European Union, always prides itself to be a civilian or normative power when dealing with the external world. In other words, its foreign policy is based on ethics, noble values, rather than military force as supposed to be Europe means of dealing with other countries. And also Europe's imperial legacy was to be put into history books with the constructions of the European Union. And if you look at official EU documents, you don't find any word hegemony there, unless it refers to other actors, but not to the EU as such. And there is no doubt that the EU is not a traditional political actor. It's quite peculiar. It's a kind of unidentified political object, to use the term coined by famous president of the European Commission and French politician Jacques Delors, who I happen to know personally. At certain times, Jacques Delors is the most famous, maybe, leader of Europe throughout its post-war history. The EU also lacks some essential structural features of a state. It has no monopoly over the legitimate means of coercion, the famous definition by Max Weber. It has not even clearly defined center of authority with a telephone number you can call, right? Its territory is not fixed due to successive enlargements and recently Brexit also. Its geographical, administrative, economic and cultural borders diverge. It is a kind of polity without a coherent demos, a power without a clear purpose, and a geopolitical entity without defined territorial limits. Really a kind of unidentified political object. And European foreign security policy, you can say, is a misnomer. Why? Because EU member states are not obliged to act through EU in their foreign affairs. They can act outside EU framework, and they actually frequently do, either through formal international organizations like United Nations, Organization for Cooperation and Security in Europe, Council of Europe, or NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or through formal or informal coalitions of the willing, or by some contact groups, bilateral initiatives. They very often use those frameworks rather than European EU framework to do their foreign policy. But it would be a mistake, I will submit to you, to assume that power and hegemony are absent within the EU and in its external actions. This is simply because politics is about power by definition. Power politics is a colloquial phrase for international politics, to use the words of a famous British professor, Martin White. And hegemony is about inequality among individual actors and the hierarchy, the ensuing hierarchy in the international system. So in the analytical terms, it is hard to claim that all EU member states are equal. Take Germany and Cyprus. Both are members of the EU, formally sovereign states, but we know that Germany is very powerful, while Cyprus is a sovereign, semi-sovereign entity, frankly. Moreover, the international system comprising of the EU and its neighbors is very hierarchical. And when we talk about hegemony, we cannot ignore also a controversial term in Europe, empire. Looking at the EU in terms of power, hegemony of empire is maybe, particularly in Europe, politically incorrect, but it facilitates comparisons with other huge territorial actors, which, like the EU, have those power resources sufficient to influence, if not manipulate, other actors, and especially in their respective peripheries. I have in mind, in particular, the United States, Russia, and China, which in my contribution to this book, I'm comparing to the EU from this perspective of hegemony. Because they all practice power politics, but what is important, they practice this power politics differently for a variety of reasons. For instance, the EU does not possess an army, so it practices power politics through trade and law, regulatory activism chiefly. Moreover, the EU doesn't have a centralized system of governance. The system of governance is very polycentric, which means that the EU is better suited to creating institutional structures and setting up the rules of legitimate behavior than to swift and bold power projections, which centralize governance structures always practice and have advantage in. So explaining similarities and differences between these four actors, EU, Russia, America, and China, looking through the prism of hegemony and power politics is very enlightening, and I invite you to read my contribution to these collective efforts. Thank you very much. Very enjoyed to be with you, and I hope we will meet again, hopefully live, in other circumstances. Goodbye.